Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack, back again to bring you our 10.1.5 Holy Paladin Mythic Plus guide, giving you everything you need to succeed in high keys. Holy Paladin has had, of course, a number of different changes when it comes to its gameplay, and I wanted to highlight first, of course, with the talents. Then we're going to talk about some of the gameplay mechanics going to be involved, how you're playing, performing. We'll also talk about stats, as well as special interactions that you really want to watch for as we're getting into Tyrannical Week coming up. Starting it off with Holy Paladin, the biggest thing to keep in mind is that you are constantly in competition with these talents for the most efficient use of your global cooldown. There's a couple of notable talents that you are not taking or avoiding or whatever. One of them is the Holy Infusion, where Crusader Strike generates additional holy power. Another one is Veneration, where your Hammer of Wrath is dealing damage and resulting in additional healing. These abilities are not bad on their own, but because the spec is so GCD capped and there's so many important things to be casting all the time, it's very difficult to be able to keep them in the talent window. And so this talent tree, and the link will be in the description down below as well if you want to import it, is going to be built off of using many small cooldowns and also being as efficient as you possibly can when it comes to GCD usage. There's always going to be some like class tree alterations you can take, justification for more damage, duracy for more damage reduction, turn evil you'll need for certain weeks like incorporeal. There's some options and some flexibility there. But generally, on the spec tree, some of the biggest things you're going to be watching for are the spell interactions between abilities like Hand of Divinity, which is a quick 1-second cast, which makes your next 2 Holy Lights instant cast, and Tears Deliverance, which is also a second and a half cast, and you're also increasing the healing of Holy Light, Flash, and Holy Shock spells in your allies, and by using the Boundless Salvation, you can extend the duration of this Tears buff to a total of 60 seconds for a 1.5-minute cooldown, leaving only 30 seconds of downtime in between the ability. And so what happens with your talent setup is you are able to flow from Tears Deliverance usage with, of course, Hand of Divinity into your other cooldowns, things like Divine Toll, Daybreak, etc. And we'll talk about that when it comes to the spell interaction section. Overall, for these talents, your whole goal is going to make sure you're using Beacon of Faith. And again, Beacon of Virtue, not a bad talent, but it is expending a lot of GCDs to be able to get good value from, which is what makes it a bit worse. Same thing with things like Veneration, same thing with Holy Infusion, like we talked about. You are putting a lower priority on casting Crusader Strikes, on casting Hammer of Wraths, and a higher priority on your most efficient abilities, namely things like Judgment, which has received the Greater Judgment change on the class tree, where dealing damage with Judgment also prevents the damage that the afflicted enemy deals in the future. And of course, Holy Shock, which now has 2 charges and has a slew of different synergies available to it. To speak a bit more about the healing breakdown, this is the breakdown I had for my Uldaman 27 run, where Holy Shock, of course, being my top healing effect, followed up by Word of Glory, then Beacons, then Glimmer, Tears Deliverance, and Greater Judgment. Both Tears and Greater Judgment are going to be higher in your healing breakdown in lower level keys because they just do a lot of like constant passive healing for you. That's always very efficient. Followed by Holy Prism, and then Overflowing Light, as we mentioned previously, is the overheal from Glimmers and making effective use of that. So this is the overall breakdown that I had in this 27 run. Like I said, we spent, 400 casts of Holy Shock between healing and damage. When it comes to my damage breakdown, Consecrate with a whopping 33% of my overall damage, followed by Shield of the Righteous. And keep in mind, Shining Righteousness is at 6.7% of my damage, also comes from Shield of the Righteous. Then using Glimmer, and we'll talk about that in the spell interaction sections, how to maximize that. I'm frequently casting Summer onto either the Mage or Shadow Priest. Usually I'm just casting it onto the Mage. You want to make sure you're avoiding classes that play with pets, as the extra damage that the pet deals isn't going to transfer into Summer. Once again, something to keep in mind. And usually I'm putting Autumn, which is cooldown reduction, onto the Mage. I think the Shadow Priest is also a decent target. The green buff, which is Spring, which is healing increase and healing taken. I'll put it on the tank on fortified pulls, and I'll put it on myself on a lot of like difficult boss fights. And then of course, Winter, you're just putting on yourself for the mana regen that you have on top of that. A lot of times I am deprioritizing Hammer of Wrath with only 80 casts relative to having, 200 hits of Holy Shock offensively. So that's something to always kind of keep in mind, that Hammer of Wrath does very good damage, It does massively heavy hit, gives you holy power, but it's not going to be giving you the glimmer interactions that you might be wanting for the increased damage done. As a result, you might be missing out a little bit in some other areas, especially if you're letting your holy shocks just overcap and not using them. Same thing with Crusader Strike. I had only 72, 73 casts, so I'm still casting it throughout the dungeon. It's just at a much lower priority than other abilities, and that's what the point I really want to make sure that I get across. When it comes to stats and trinkets, I've been running with a really large amount of haste, and it hasn't been feeling quite good enough to lower the GCD. Seeing a lot of other Holy Pallies reduce the haste that they're having down to around 30% or so, and really upping a lot of their crit. While versatility is wonderful for survivability, Paladin's just about the tankiest it gets for healers, and I find that I don't really need that versatility quite at all. So I'm going to be recrafting a lot of my gear personally into haste crit, or maybe even crit verse if I just can't get rid of some of the haste I have at the moment, because you also get a lot from your talents in the process. While Holy Pally does amazing amounts of damage, I so far have not been running any damage trinkets. I've been running the Ward of Ire for safety, for the extra shield effect, and Rashok's to be able to heal, give mana, buff my allies in the process. If you have a Beacon of the Beyond, great, but I would also caution you guys not to worry so much about taking every little opportunity possible to maximize your damage, because if you're building from a safe perspective, with the strength of Augmentation Evoker, with all the crazy buffs that it's tossing out all the time, I have been finding that I really am only now getting to the point with like 27s or something where I need to really worry about min-maxing my damage. So for the vast majority of players, if you are keeping people alive in your groups, you're keeping them safe, get your Consecrate and your Judgments out, you're going to be doing a lot of damage in the process. So don't stress that too much. But do stress about seeing if you're subscribed to the channel to be able to support all the content we're putting together. So as I mentioned before, the spec is extremely GCD capped, meaning there's a ton of different effective things you can be doing with every single global. That said, a rough priority for how you want to be using your abilities is, of course, keeping Judgment down. You have a talent called Strength of Conviction on the class tree that increases the damage of your Shield of the Righteous and the healing of your Word of Glory. So having both of those as some of your highest healing or damage means it's extremely important to be casting most of your spells in that Consecrate. Of course, using your Holy Shock charges, using Judgment on cooldown, and frequently consuming your Infusion of Light procs with it are always insanely important to make sure you're keeping in mind. I'm not using any Light of Dawn in dungeons at the moment. In fact, I'm using predominantly Word of Glory when it comes to healing, and of course, Shield of the Righteous for damage. So not overcapping on Holy Power. Make sure you're spending it in some capacity whatsoever. I've been keeping my beacons on the tank and usually on a range because of the new mastery, where increase in healing is dependent upon your range between your target and yourself, or the beacon targets, whoever is closer. So having it on a range, always going to be insanely good. Most of the time, I'm using Holy Prism on cooldown, and I'm using it defensively, using it on an ally to be able to provide more like spot healing support for them, and take advantage of the extra holy power that we're getting thanks to our tier set bonus. In general, I'm using it defensively, but there's times, of course, where everybody's taking equal damage. You could use it offensively to heal everybody all at once. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Some of the biggest gameplay, though, revolves around how your talents are working. Since you have a cap to how much Glimmer you can have out, but you also have abilities that are consuming the Glimmer, it's incredibly important to make sure that you are manually spreading around Glimmer onto your allies, because even if that Glimmer is overhealing, you have the Overflowing Light talent, which means the overheal of Glimmer turns into Absorb Shields, which helps smooth out a lot of the really bursty damage that you see in high-level dungeons. It also just makes it easier to be able to push more beacon transfer heals into your allies as well, providing just another additional layer of safety to them. When it comes to Holy Paladin, there's a lot of specific spell interactions that are incredibly important for healing higher level keys. Specifically, when we get to Tyrannical Week, you are going to need to space out how you utilize abilities and work them out together to maximize their effects. So from the start, if you're in a very steady healing environment, you can pretty much just kind of chain a couple of abilities one after another, and be very successful. Something like the third boss of Halls of Infusion is excellent for this. What I really try to do is make sure I start with Tyr's Deliverance. Let's say I have all my cooldowns at the start of a pull. I'll start by utilizing Tyr's Deliverance in conjunction with the Hand of Divinity to get my instant cast Holy Lights, and those are really the only times I'm casting Holy Light. I will then spend those over the 20-second Hand of Divinity duration on any spot healing required. That also extends the duration of Tears Deliverance onto my allies, and then the rest of the time I'm just making sure I'm hitting Holy Shock into targets that have Tears Deliverance on them, and I should be able to get the full extension without an issue. Now, what I like to do on the third boss of Halls is once people are starting to tick down and bleed down a little bit more, I'll have my Tears buff. After, let's say, 15 to 30 seconds or so, then I'll weave in Divine Toll. The way I like using Divine Toll and Daybreak together, however, is also really important. You don't always have to stack these together. I think it's really good to do it on really bursty boss fights, maybe like the first boss of Halls or Forge Master and Neltherus. But what you can do is you manually apply glimmers to your allies in between Daybreak cooldowns. And you can use this in the same way for dealing damage also, but you are not using Divine Toll and then consuming it instantly with Daybreak. What I like to do instead is the opposite of this, so that you consume Daybreak, which then triggers Rising Sunlight, which means that your Holy Shocks are going to trigger additional times, which also means Glimmer is going to trigger additional times. And so for healing or for damage, you can use it in this fashion, where you Daybreak, consume the Glimmers, use Divine Toll to put out 5 new ones, and then you're able to trigger new Holy Shocks, okay? And keep in mind, Rising Sunlight is not consumed by Divine Toll. So you could put out 5 new Glimmers, and then when you cast your next Holy Shock, it's going to hit 3 times, activating 3 Glimmer effects on each of the 5 targets that you Divine Tolled, resulting in more damage, more healing, whatever it might be. And all of those Holy Shocks from both Divine Toll and from Rising Sunlight are being buffed by Tears Deliverance on your allies for 25%. So you chain these cooldowns together so that you still have Tears Deliverance uptime into really powerful Glimmer absorption from Daybreak, into new Glimmer application from Divine Toll, into powerful defensive Holy Shocks onto allies to result in even more beacon transfers and even more Glimmer overall healing. And if it overheals, well, then you have overheal protection with Overflowing Light, as we mentioned previously. So there's a lot of these ways that you chain spell effects together to be able to properly utilize. So frequently, if I feel really comfortable with my overall healing, I often am chaining Tears into Daybreak / Divine Toll into Wings uptime. Sometimes I'm able to just get natural good Wings uptime out of getting my Awakening stacks. I'm really not holding on to Judgment very long. I'll keep an eye on it if like a pull is about to end, but usually I'm just kind of sending Wings on cooldown, kind of sending my various abilities on cooldown. But I'm keeping in mind on boss fights in particular that I'll just space things out. They're pretty much the only time I would like hold Wings or hold Tears or anything, is if I know that there's going to be incoming damage a little bit later, and then I can start spacing out these abilities. But the big benefit of Holy Pally is that you always have another short cooldown in your back pocket to be able to help. Even in like an emergency, you have your bubble, you could sack somebody, you can lay on hands somebody else. You have a lot of really good resources at your disposal to be able to help. But I do think making the most out of your Daybreak and your Divine Toll is going to be some of the biggest value possible for you. Because even if you're using it for damage, you're also going to be able to trigger 3 offensive Glimmer effects per enemy that you're Holy Shocking after you've Daybreaked, once you've already Divine Tolled all these enemies, resulting in some of the highest healer damage out there in the game at the moment, and just some really, really powerful overall contribution to your group in the process. And most of that is coming from Consecrate and from Shield of the Righteous in the process. I realize there's a lot of abilities going on and a lot of interactions with the spec, but if you're keeping in mind how Tears Deliverance sort of feeds everything else, you're going to be in a much better position than most to be able to take advantage of it. Once again, for overall healing, regular healing, I'm using Word of Glory for spot healing if I'm overcapped on Holy Power, Holy Shock, or Holy Prism. Otherwise, for the spot healing effects, I'm very rarely casting Holy Light, pretty much only during my Hand of Divinity, and that's also always going to be paired with Tears Deliverance in the process. If you guys have any other questions, or you're interested in a more Holy Pally raid guide, let me know in the description down below. Be sure to sub to the channel for more, and let me know if there's anything else that you guys want me to address with Holy Pally. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you all found this helpful. I'll catch y'all next time.